first I would like to thank Elena, Miriam and Dunya for organization and for inviting us here and giving us the opportunity to come and talk to you. So, first of all, I would like to talk about the technology, where it's going in the recent future, and the advances in artificial intelligence and so on. I'll go through maybe some specific technologies will be mainstream, and we'll talk about the details, the implications on the market, on humanity. And then I'll talk about some aspects of innovation, and then I'll end with my perspectives on how to use innovation, to use organizations to become much more effective and innovative at what they do. So if you look at the population of the Earth since the beginning of modern human evolution, about 300,000 years ago, until 1800 approximately, the population of Earth was less than 1 billion, so it's about 950 million people. In the span of 200 years, we went from less than 1 billion to 7.5 billion people. And that trend continues to increase. So continents like Europe, for example, they are declining. Continents like Asia is expected to stabilize. The biggest contributor to the population is going to be the African continent, actually. So the population will continue to increase, and will reach pretty soon about 9 to 10 billion people. So that is a huge population. It's interesting is, at the same time, we're having an increase in technology that is exponential. It's at unprecedented levels. So if you look only at the computational powers that's going to be available in the next 15 years, for example, by 2030, let's say, that computational power is going to be equivalent to one human brain. And if we continue with that trend, the computational power eventually will reach to a point that one computer will be equivalent to billions of people capability and mental ability. You can imagine the consequences from this happening. So you have huge exponential technology, a lot of advancement. At the same time, we have exponential growth in population, which is something that's interesting. We'll discuss a bit about it now. So robotics, in the US by itself, by 2050, it's estimated that the robotic market will have an impact of 50 million jobs on the economy. By 2025, it's, that market by itself is going to be 70 billion. So robotics are advancing more and more. At NASA, for example, we have Robonaut 2, and it's a robot that is very dexterous. It can use the hands to move things and shake hands and do maneuvers with it. The robotic market is increasing a lot. It's becoming very advanced. And if we continue on this, in 50 years, approximately, plus or minus, robotics will be so advanced it will be very difficult to distinguish a human being from a robot. So, but that by itself is not enough. So if we have a robot that looks like a human, that has capabilities to act like a human and use infrastructure that humans do, it's something that can impact maybe the labor market. And that's a discussion we had a long time ago when we had the beginning of the century with the Industrial Revolution. We thought the equipment, the machineries, the automation will have significant impacts on jobs. Turned out not to be true. A lot of the jobs were reshuffled from one place to another, and the job market continues to grow. The problem here now is intelligence, artificial intelligence combined with these robots. That's when we're creating a new paradigm. So imagine a computational power of billions of people in a brain, in a robot that looks like humans. And we're talking about essentially creating a new species here. So it's completely game-changing technology that will have significant impact on everything that we do. So experts will argue that every time there is a technology, it will create new jobs. And most of the cases, that is the case. The problem here is we're not creating a technology. We're creating almost, like I said, a new species that will compete in a lot of the jobs that humans do. So that is something that a lot of scientists and world thought experts and leaders argue both ways. 50% will say it will have a positive impact on jobs and creation and economy, and the other 50% it will have a negative, substantially negative impact. We always often have discussions about all kinds of jobs, and we can essentially have an intelligent argument about how most of the jobs today could be replaced by artificial intelligence. You can replace lawyers, medical doctors, engineers, drivers, accountants. It's so much the number of jobs that can be impacted. There will always be jobs that only humans can do, of course. So the key is here, what are these jobs and how can we capitalize on them and do them better? At the same time, computational power, advancements in robotics are advancing. So today, for example, we have gloves that we're having at work. You can wear gloves and you become much stronger. You can do things for thousands of times without getting tired. You can wear lenses that you can actually take pictures with. You can use augmented reality glasses and do so many things. So as technology advances, we're trying to implement and integrate a lot of these technological systems into our bodies. The question is, in 25 years, in 50 years, how close will be to cyborgs, you know, how more integrated will be. Science fiction often, you know, refers to these kind of things, but the way the trend is going, I think will be a lot of wearable devices, us as humans will be actually putting together. So what needs to happen here is we need to work with academia, with government agencies and industry as well. What can we do? How, you know, if you look at the next 10 jobs, 10 years for example, and 10 years from now, they estimate that 60% of the job do not exist today. So how do you graduate skills and workers for jobs that don't even know what the jobs will be? So we need to actually reevaluate the whole educational systems. Academia, industry, and government need to work together to start looking into how can we actually adapt fast and strategize about the main jobs in the future and start using the adequate skill work that will actually be able to have an impact in the economy and continue to drive the economy and job growth. So why are we interested in innovation at NASA? So if you look at this map here, essentially what we had is the last few years we done a space shuttle program, and the space shuttle was intended to build a space station, which is the best national lab that we have. It's a substantially expensive and very complex effort put together internationally by so many different nations. So that mission was completed. There was no more point to keep spending on the space shuttle. So we retired the space shuttle, and we're concentrating on going to deep space. So the next destinations we're thinking about are going to be Moon, Mars, and asteroids. Right now, things seem to point toward Mars. So by finishing this, we actually enabled the commercial space industry to go into low Earth orbit. So because of the technologies that were developed by NASA, we actually enabled a lot of these new entries into the market. You hear about SpaceX, Orbital, Blue Origin, and so on. So all these companies were able to capitalize about the vast amount of technology and innovation that we created throughout the years. And they're taking it and they're creating a new economy and the business out of that, which is flourishing substantially. Another thing, actually, if you look at what's happening in the recent future, the technology is becoming smaller, miniaturization of things. So nowadays, you don't need a satellite that's almost the size of a car and to launch it, and some things can last you 20, 30 years in orbit. You can build a small satellite that looks like a small cube and launch it at a fraction of the price and do a lot of the work that you need. So that thing by itself, miniaturization of hardware and cheap access to space, is creating a new wave of startup companies all across the world. So because these are the fertile grounds that's needed for these new entries into the market. And there is a lot of gaps still that people can go into venture and create new business lines and becoming a completely new area that we haven't expected in the last decade or so. So to do that, to go to Mars, it's going to be extremely challenging. It's extremely difficult and risky, complex, expensive. So we need to think creatively, think out of the box. How can we actually do things cheaper, better, faster? How could we align with international alliances and to make these endeavors, these complex endeavors, possible in the near future? So if you look also at the government, NASA for example, how was the contribution to the economies? We look at they were concentrating on the aeronautics field. So out of that came out Boeing, Airbus, Boeing and Lockheed. So by itself, this aviation industry is a $1 trillion industry right now, creating millions of jobs. The same thing is, like I said, with putting together all this technology. The commercial space industry by itself is about 330 billion in 2014 and expected to continue growing. And more and more small startups are starting to come into the market, and it will be a completely game changer. So there is a lot of technologies that will be mainstream. I can point tens and tens of those. Some of them is near term, some of them is a little bit further in the future. But we talked about miniaturization. Let's just show you a quick example here. So this is 5 megabytes. 5 megabytes in 1956. So you can appreciate the difference between that and what we have right now. And then go 10 years from now. I mean, it's amazing the advancements and progress we're having in the scientific field. 3D manufacturing, it has implications in everything we do. For space, for example, we're really interested in 3D manufacturing, because once we send humans to Mars or to a remote location, we cannot afford to send all the spare parts with us. And to get new spare parts, that can be a very complex endeavor to do. So what we can do is we can send a file electronically, and then we can use the sand from Mars or sand from the Moon, for example, to create the feedstock for the 3D manufacturing and be able to manufacture things on the spot. In the medical field, we're talking about essentially 3D printing organs. So 3D printing organs. In the food industry, we're talking about printing food, 3D printing food. Now the clothing industry, the clothing stores. So in the future, you'll go to a store, there will be some equipment, some technology that will scan you, 3D scan, and do the measurements that you have. And you choose what colors and what you want as a shirt, and walk around having coffee. By the time you finish, you'll have your brand new printed shirt or clothes or pants or whatever it is, right? So we're talking about completely different future. And that's not too far away from us, actually. It's going to happen sooner than you think. Now let's concentrate a little bit more on driverless cars. Driverless cars is a very fascinating thing. And I decided to take just this example to dig deeper into it. So tell you that each one of these technologies have vast implications on everything we do as humanity. And I'll go a little bit more than that. So one day, when I was in California, working at NASA Ames, so I was grabbing a coffee from a coffee shop, and I got out and I saw this very weird-looking car with so many equipment and things rotating. So, what is that thing? So I found out it was one of the Google cars, the driverless cars that were actually driving around. And the thing with driverless cars, the way it does it, is you need to develop algorithms. So the more information you have, the more you drive, the finer the algorithms you have, and the better job you can do at maneuvering and doing things. So there is a study by Harvard University. They estimate in the United States by itself, in the lifespan of humans, you spend about 40,000 hours behind the wheel, just driving. So imagine how much time is wasted with that. So if we find a way for new generations to take that impact away and have saved them 40,000 hours, imagine how much productivity that will have on the market, how much that will improve the economy. You can do so many things with that. It's unbelievable. Another goal from the driverless cars is to have zero accidents. The human is always the weakest link here. If you take that human elements from the loop, I think we will reach a point where things are significantly safer. And like I said, the end goal is hopefully to reach no accident, zero accident with that thing here, with the driverless cars. When you have, in the States, for example, again, we have 2 cars per family. So there is absolutely to have no cars per family. The way you use car, I take my car, I drive to work, and it's 90% of the time parked in the garage, in the parking lot. So what's the point of having a car? So the thing is, you'll have one car, and you start calculating algorithms based on how many people need to drive the times. And with artificial intelligence, you can start evaluating what's the best conditions for transportation. So there is absolutely no need to have more than one car per family. And the next step, we're talking about having small fleet of cars per neighborhoods. So that will completely revolutionize the amount of cars. And you will not see as many cars in the streets. So that will have huge implications on the environment. So there is the least car that we have, the better the environment will be, and that will be something good for the planet. Now traffic. So traffic is two aspects. First of all, we're going to have less cars. So the least cars we have, obviously we have less traffic. But not only that, when you're driving on a freeway, you can ride up to 140, 150. So cars could be significantly closer to each other, going much, much faster. Because even 2 or 3 kilometers ahead, cars will be communicating with each other. So if there's a problem, there's something, cars will automatically start synchronizing with each other, start dropping down the speed. So you can go faster, in a sense you can actually create less traffic jams and get there faster. So from all these, traffic will be something in the past, I believe. Something interesting is, now we have this technology, for example, right now there's a driverless cars outside here. I get into this car, I go to the freeway, and the car drives at 140 kilometers. Psychologically, it's going to be a big deal, because we're not used to that. We need to have control. So imagine you get into a vehicle that's driving by itself, you have absolutely no control, go at such a high speed, and so I think people will have an anxiety attached with that and be very anxious. Now the new generations that are growing up with that will be normal things for them, but the older generation, like us, it will be a little bit different to get acquainted and used to these kinds of things. So another thing is the older population, when people get to a certain age, they cannot drive anymore, so the driver license is being taken away. So that's actually a big impact on that, right? So if we can find a way to have cars that can take all these people to different places, different destinations, without having to rely on other people, I think that will be huge for the older population as well. So ethics is, I would say, the most complicated issue here, even more than technology itself. So if you're riding one of these cars and you have a baby on the side, or a bus full of babies and then a bus for adults, so you had to hit one of them. Which one do you hit, the adults or the babies? Or if you're driving and there's a passenger kind of crossing the street, which one has priority, the person in the car or the person outside the car? Which one do you save? So these are very, very complex issues. And we've had several discussions, and every time we have a discussion, there's always arguments and controversies. So I think, in my opinion, that will be one of the most challenging issues that we need to resolve, is the ethics of it. And then, because once we have the rules, that will be the rules that we implement for the future. It will probably be something that applies across different nations as well. So new services. So once you have the driverless cars, new services will come into play here. So we'll have maybe entertainment, new entertainment technologies will come for people because now that they're not driving, they can do more things, right? So what type of services will we have to do? Maybe people are talking about having food services as well. You can have maybe certain things to cook food or whatever, right? We're talking about very interesting things. So the cool thing here, I see that as an opportunity. So this is an opportunity with a lot of startups can come in and start thinking about these today, not when driverless cars are already in the market. So today we know the driverless cars is a sure thing, there's no doubt. Now start thinking about industries, technologies that actually tailor as services to these companies. And if you start right now, you'll be ahead of the curve. You'll be very successful in penetrating this market and this industry as well. Safety, so these cars, like I mentioned, when I saw the first car, there were so many things coming out of it and rotating and shining things and producing energy. So when you have several cars on the street, that's not a problem. But when you have millions of cars driving every day back and forth, we need to understand what are the implications of these energies that are coming from these cars in the long-term human health. And that's something we need to understand properly, because we don't want to solve the problem and create other problems in the future. Now let's talk about the impacts. How does driverless car can impact the economy? So if you are kind of manufacturers and you're used to manufacture millions of cars per year, and suddenly there is a need only for a fraction of that. So how would that impact the manufacturing industry? People need to start thinking about it today. And the thing is, with supply and demand, and then if you only need a very, very small amount of cars, then obviously the price of the cars can go very high. So how do we do that balance? How that balance can look like? That's something definitely needs to be looked at. Insurance companies, if my car never gets into an accident, I know all the time where my car is, so why do I need to insure my car? There's probably not that much. First of all, you'll have less cars to insure because there will be a fraction of the cars. And second is that people needing insurance will probably diminish substantially. So insurance companies will also have to think about changing the business model to adapt to the new technologies coming into the market. Now hotels. So hotel industry, you see driverless cars in a hotel and you see them completely unrelated. But in fact, for example, you go to Odessa to spend the night and then go there the next day to work. So you get into your car and you sleep in the car because you're not driving, right? You can even sleep, go there, do your job and come back no matter what the time is. If you get tired, just go to the back seat and sleep. So how is that going to impact the hotel industry, right? So again, all these things need to be put into consideration and discussed as well. Parking in big cities also will be not needed because there is no need for driverless cars. So if that's the case, it could be adapted and readjusted to be used for something else, so that would be an advantage. So these are just some of the things I kind of thought of top of my head a while back. But there's other implications. That tells you one single technology like this, how much impacts on all these elements that we talked about, in terms of improvements, in terms of challenges, and so on. Obviously, the most important thing is going to be cybersecurity. Without having robust cybersecurity, none of these technologies will be possible. Imagine you're driving in a car, if the car is driving you somewhere, somebody hacks into it and takes you somewhere. So how is like that? Right? So we need to have infrastructure, technology, and security that are actually paramount in order to be able to secure all these technologies. Now, I'm going to talk quickly about some change topics, talk about some different elements of innovation. So I'll start with disruptive innovations. There are so many technologies have disrupted the whole market. And I'm just actually going to talk quickly about Zara and Netflix. So Zara, anybody uses Zara to shop around here? Yeah? So Zara, when it started, people thought it's not going to be successful. The clothing industry is one of the most competitive industries in the market. And when Zara came in, we thought about it and we said, okay, how can we make a difference? How can we do something that nobody else is doing? So what they did is, in a conventional clothing industry, it takes about a year between some designer designs something, between the time it hits the shelves, it's approximately 1 year. Now Zara does that, the whole thing, in 2 weeks. It does that, and then also it creates an element of scarcity. It doesn't print a lot of it doesn't produce a lot of the garments at the same time. So it creates 5 of these shirts, 5 of these shirts, 5 of these shirts. So it creates sense of scarcity. So that means a shirt that I have, not a lot of people are going to have it. And they do something interesting is they collect substantial feedback from customers that come to the stores. So when you're in the store, they ask you, hey, what do you think about this shirt? They get you feedback and they talk to as many people as possible. They send all that feedback to the headquarters. They analyze the data. And if there's trends that a lot of people like certain models, certain designs, 2 weeks later, we'll have new design based on the feedback of the people. So you can see it's a huge shift from the conventional apparel industry. And right now, Zara has 2,000 stores across the world, everywhere. Now, Netflix, in my opinion, it's fascinating, not because they're innovative, whether you do it, but also don't be satisfied. If you are successful, keep moving forward. So when the technology was archaic, we used to do the VHS cassettes to watch movies. And in the States, if you're late, you used to have to pay a late fee. And in my case, almost every single time I had to pay a late fee because I never could go there in time and return it. So renting a cassette was costing me so much money just to watch a movie. So it was actually an issue that a lot of customers were complaining about. So when the DVD industry was developed, then Netflix developed a brilliant distribution scheme. So they put distribution schemes across different cities, and within 1 to 2 days, you order it online and you get your DVD to the house. Now something different that they did, they created a subscription model for the first time. So you don't rent one by one, you created a subscription that you rented, and then you get 1 or 2 or 3 per month, or 3 at the same time. They created so many different models, and basically it was impressive. They went to Blockbuster to offer to talk about discussions for acquisition and so on, and they weren't interested. And eventually Blockbuster went out of business because of that. Another thing, so Netflix at that time was the top leader in the market. It was acquiring customers substantially, while Blockbuster and Hollywood Video was going down at a very fast slope. So what they did is they were not satisfied because customers are very impatient. They want things fast. They want things right now. So at that time, the broadband industry came on. So they started actually streaming the movies. So instead of waiting for a movie to arrive by mail, you could go to the web page and watch the movie online on the spot immediately. And again, they became extremely successful and they were doing a great job. But they were not satisfied because they anticipated if we stay in that domain, that's a domain that could have competition, or somebody else could come and break us apart. So what they did is reinvented themselves again, and they became a production company. So now Netflix is a production company. They produce so many series, so many movies, and they're winning Oscars. That tells you how good they are. And that's a perfect example how being successful is not enough. You have to always be innovating and going ahead of the competition to be able to make it into this challenging environment. Now, as corporations and big companies, they need to watch out what happens in the startups, the small startups. Because small technology could have huge impact on the whole market, could disrupt the whole industry. Like we talked about, for example, Airbnb disrupting substantially the hotel business, Uber disrupting completely the taxi industry, and there's tons of examples of that. So big corporations have to be smart, have to look into what's going on with the big, small players and small garages, and either acquire them early or do alliances with them or do something, because you cannot afford to neglect small startups anymore. With the technology, with the ways things are going, you could actually, one small startup could disrupt the whole industry. So people talk about creativity. Is being creative something you are born with or something you learn? Obviously, some people are more creative by nature than others, but creativity is something you can substantially learn and become much more effective at it. For myself, for example, I've taken a lot of graduate certificates from Stanford. I read publications, books. I worked with people that were very creative, and all these things make big impact, make you even think better. So if you're going to be creative, if you're going to be more innovative, I think there are definitely ways to do that, and it's not necessarily something you're definitely born with. So let me give you a quick example about creativity. So there's a company in Holland that they sell very advanced bicycles. They are electronic bikes with a lot of sensitive equipment. And I think they were estimating 50% of these bikes were having damage every time they were delivered. Because of the shipping, they were being rough on them, so with the shipping, they were getting substantial damages. So they thought about how can we reduce that. They thought about so many solutions, and one of the guys thought, what if we actually package the bike as if it was a TV? So by just changing the box, the design of the box, they were able to reduce the damage by 70 to 80%. So it didn't cost them anything, just being able to create, to think creatively. Look at the huge amount of reduction in damage that they got. Now, innovation sometimes comes from nature. We don't have to go far. You can look at how nature behaves and reacts, and you can actually learn a lot from it. So a few years ago, I was in Japan, and we went to a lotus farm. And I noticed actually that the lotus leaves, the water never sticks to it. It keeps flowing back and forth, which is fascinating. So one of the professors that I was with, he told me actually some Japanese scientists looked at the microstructure from the leaf, and they found how it's composed. And they went and they created yogurt lids that actually nothing gets stuck to them. You know, if you eat yogurt, every time you open, there's something stuck to it, right? So by doing that, they were able to solve that problem by something simple. Just looking at nature to do that. You know, biomimicry by itself, I think there are hundreds, if not thousands, of examples of innovation that we use, things that we use in our daily life that came purely from nature. So let me quickly talk about cross-industry innovation, basically innovation combining different industries. So in Africa, they were one of the developing countries in Africa was getting donations, incubators for kids. And these incubators were state-of-the-art, excellent technology, the best that were used to save small kids' lives. The problem is, whenever you had a failure, they had no spares. So we put them in storage, and that was the end of it. So that was a big shame, you know, because these were amazing, expensive equipment, and there was no way for them to keep using it and producing the results that they were using for it. So what they did is, a group of engineers went there, and they found that this Toyota, specific Toyota car, four-wheel drive, was the most popular car, the most commonly car used in that country. So what they did is redesign a new incubator based on parts that were derived from the car. So if you have a spare, something's wrong, something's broken, you go to the junkyard or you go to the dealership, get a new part and replace the damage that you had in your incubator. And that was able to have substantial benefits actually to everything they did there. So this is another interesting story about cross-industry, how different industries connect lives and create products. So this is a car mechanic from Argentina. So one day they were having dinner, a party, and they were drinking wine, and they were opening the bottle of wine, and they noticed that the cork got inside instead of going out. So they started betting who can get the cork from out of the bottle without breaking the bottle. So several people tried and nobody was successful. So eventually this guy brought a plastic bag, put it inside the bottle, wrapped it, inflated it, and was able to get the cork out of the bottle. And he won the bet. He went home and started thinking about what he did. And then he had a gynecology friend that he had. So he started talking to his gynecology friend about, this is what we did, is there, what else can we use it for? And the result was inventing something that was used in developing countries to help with the childbirth. And this little thing was able to save so many people by having very simple technology. Was there by a car mechanic at the party drinking wine? So sometimes, you know, you see things happen out of nowhere if you don't have to connect the dots. So combining innovation, look at, for example, the Coke can and the bottle. And for the bottle, you need a bottle opener. Sometimes you don't find bottle openers anywhere. So they come up with this idea where you actually combine the mechanism of opening a can to a bottle, and it's very simple. So you can open it without having actually to have a bottle opener for that. And this is an interesting example. So there's a bakery in New York. They created the cronuts, which is a combination of donut and croissant. So combining things create, you know, products that are very essential. There is also so many examples of combining things. So you don't even have to think very far. You know, you see two things and you combine them together. You create a new product, and that product is substantial. You can have so much benefits to everybody. So open innovation is something that we've been capitalizing on substantially at NASA. It's very, very essential. Let me give you a quick example by Harvard. So there was a way Harvard was interested in doing algorithm for nucleotide sequencing. So they worked on it for years. They spent multiple $1 million, and they were able to produce something that was 70% accurate. They spent $2 million approximately on that. And then the time it took for the sequencing was 4.3 hours. So they weren't satisfied with that. They said, that takes a long time, that's not very accurate. Let's see if we can actually do something different. So what they did is they hired 2 postdocs, and they paid about $120,000 at that time. And they were successful. They were able to increase the accuracy from 72 to 77 and reduce the time to 47 minutes. But then, with the emergence of open platforms, of open innovation, they said, okay, let's put this challenge in the market. Let's see what happens out there. So they put this challenge in the open market, and look at the fascination that happened is they got an algorithm that was able to solve it with 80% accuracy. It took only 16 seconds, and the whole cost was $6,000. And the interesting thing, the person that solved it was not from the medical industry. It was completely unrelated to that field. If you notice, most of the solutions will often come from industries that are completely divergent, nothing to do with what you're working on. Because when you are an engineer, for example, you're, let's say, automotive engineer, all you're thinking is about the environment. You know, you have similar thinking. All of you guys have group thinking. If you're working as a doctor, you think as a doctor, all the group thinking. So when you throw an idea and you have people from group of people from different backgrounds looking at it, you will come with solutions that you will never expect ever that you're going to get it. So it's very important that you reach the people outside of your industry, and we'll talk a little bit more as well. So let me give quick perspectives on innovation based on what I've learned and things I can share with you, how to make organizations better, if you have a business, how to make it more successful, and so on. So in terms of innovation, there is 2 kinds of innovation. There is evolutionary innovation, and there's revolutionary innovation. So evolutionary innovation is, for example, your smartphones. Your smartphones, if you notice, every year you have the 4S, you have the 5S, you have the 6S, whatever the heck it is, it keeps improving, but it's not drastically, right? It's just a little bit. All you're doing is just increasing the memory by a little bit, making it a little bit faster, improving the quality of the camera, but you're not really doing innovation. It's just basically improving the products a little bit. Now, revolutionary is what happened between having dial phones or the old little phones, the square phones, to the smartphones. Now that was revolutionary innovation. And it's very expensive and it's very challenging, and the success rate is very, very small. The problem is, the thing is, it will be very, very impactful if you do it. So when it comes to innovation, and companies typically recommend, don't put your eggs in one basket, because innovation is has very high success, very high failure rate. So don't try to diversify as much as possible, because if you put everything in one helmet, one criteria, in one model, one line, it will be very problem that you fail often. So you need to diversify it as much as you can to be able to be successful in what you do here. So to do that, because innovation is frustrating, it takes a long time for good innovations to become successful. You need to make sure that every now and then you choose one innovation that's going to be simple. It's not going to be complicated. Because psychologically you get frustrated after a while, trying and failing, trying and failing. So you have to every now and then give yourself a break and and try to shoot for small innovation, not something very, very high, and that will help you a lot in the long term. Now, also it's very important to validate the key business assumptions early. Any of you knows, familiar with a company called Zappos? The shoes company? Yeah? So Zappos actually, they apply this concept perfectly. So the intention from what they were trying to do was to sell shoes on a web page. So what was the fundamental assumption? The fundamental assumption is, will people buy shoes online? I mean, shoes is something that's actually very personal. People would like to wear it, walk with them, you know, have the feel, how they look like, how they feel. So there was a lot of concern that will people buy shoes online? So to validate the early assumptions in the cycle, instead of spending millions of dollars building web pages, you know, doing warehouses filled with shoes and spending so much time and money, what they did, they got a credit card, they went to a shoe store, and they bought a whole bunch of shoes. And then they created a very simple, very primitive web page. And then they went to Google, they bought some advertisement from Google AdWords. And then they went into the market. And actually they found that they were very successful. And then people were buying shoes left and right. So actually this company, Zappos, ended up being acquired by Amazon. That tells you it's perfect execution. You know, people talk often about success rate of startups is very low, 9 out of 10 fail. But I mean, in my opinion, I don't think it's the case. There's certain elements you can do, and if you follow them, you'll increase your success rate by orders of magnitude, substantially more. And it's not that difficult to discuss these things. So employees usually in companies, I found that they are broken into two parts. Some employees are considered farmers, and some employees are considered hunters. Farmers is, give me my task, I'll go in the corner, I have nothing to do with anything, don't mess with me, I'll finish my task and give it back to you. Hunters are people that always jumping from one place to another, talking to these people, going there, getting something from here. But the problem with hunters, they never finish a task. So they keep doing so many things and then nothing gets finished, nothing gets completed. So if you want to be successful, you have to find a perfect balance between farmers and hunters, put it together, and that will drastically change the way things are happening in the company. Now, when it comes to ideas, it's very essential that they make people feel that they are part of the team. I mean, when you become a director, manager, an executive, obviously you can tell people what to do. But I never do that. I like to explain to people basically why are we doing that, and get their inputs and make them feel part of the solution, part of the problem, part of the design. Because that way they feel they are part of the team, and when they're working on something they are part of, as opposed to being part of something for somebody else's product. So psychologically, it's very essential, very important that actually bring the employees and make them feel part of what's going on, and they have vested interest. Because that's the difference between management and leadership. If you use that one, you'll be leading people as opposed to managing people. If you lead people, you'll have much better results. So for innovation, it's very important to have brainstorming sessions. And brainstorming, you have to do two things. So that you have to build a multidisciplinary team. A multidisciplinary team, it has to be different people, different backgrounds, different ages, different educational level, different ethnicities, different everything. You know, the more diverse, the better. If you have an engineer, a lawyer, a business person, an artist, somebody from China, somebody from India, somebody from the States, somebody from Europe, the ideas you will get and the solutions, you will never ever get ideas like that if we were a homogeneous group of engineers, a homogeneous group of doctors, and so on. So the group dynamics is very important to select and try to diversify your group as much as possible. Now, when it comes with ideas for the brainstorming, quantity is very important initially, more than quality. And you have to be careful not to judge any person, any ideas. So if you give me an idea, I tell you, no, it's not going to work. We're starting getting ideas. No, it's not going to work. So what happens is you're going to stop, you're going to shut down. You're not going to give us more ideas. But what I told you, you know what, I like your idea. Actually, you can combine it with your idea, and we can mix it with the idea that he's doing there, and we'll produce an excellent product. So by that, you create a positive environment that actually people are contributing more. And obviously there will be a phase where we go through everything else and determine which things make sense, which things doesn't make sense. But at this stage, you have to do it that way. So use yes and. It's a key here to keep flowing and ensure you come up with creative solutions. Failure is not an option. That's something we hear all the time. In my opinion, failure is totally an option. actually that's how we learn from a lot of the things that we do. We learn, we make mistakes, and we learn something, we make next things better. So it's very important. Now, there's a difference between failing in a lab environment and between failing when you have a rocket on the launch pad with people on it. Now, at that time, failure is totally not an option, so it's definitely a different process. So if you look at Thomas Edison, he said, I haven't failed, I just found 10,000 ways that won't work. I just want to share also something about psychology and encouraging people. So Thomas Edison came from home one day with a note from his school, and he gave the note to his mother, and his mother read the note, and she told him, you know what, the school is actually sending me this note. They're saying that you are too smart for your classmates. I mean, you have superior intelligence, and that school doesn't have the capability to keep you there. So we're going to have to homeschool you to actually can bring you up to make sure you get all the time that you require. So he went and he got homeschooled, and he became one of the best inventors of our time. Thomas Edison, he contributed so many inventions to them. So as time passed, his mother died actually, and one day he was going through her stuff, and he found a specific note that actually was given to him by the school so many years ago. And he read the notes, and the note was saying, your son is mentally challenged. He has actually a problem, he will never be able to graduate from school, we can't keep him in the school here. So imagine, but what his mother did, it's the same person, right? I mean, it's no different, just the note, what the note says is different. By having positive attitude and encouraging people and making them believe in themselves, you can create amazing stuff. I can, you know, as you go in life, you'll find so many people will tell you, this is too difficult for you, oh, you can't do that, oh man, that's for smart people, you can't do that stuff. I can tell you right now, each and every one of you here, you can do absolutely anything you want. If you put time, effort, and energy into it, there's no limitations to the human power, to anything you can do. So, as a Chief Innovation Officer, that is by far the most frustrating thing I've ever encountered. If it ain't broken, don't fix it. You come and say, nothing wrong with it, you know, why do you need to improve it? And that is very, very frustrating. There is always room for improvement, no matter what you do. You know, we say, well, if that was the case, you know, people will be riding in horses to work. You know, nothing was wrong with horses, so why do something different? Or look at the cars from earlier in the century, we're driving maybe 10 miles, 10 kilometers per hour. So you always look for improvement, you have to improve. If it makes sense, look at it. You can modify it, make it better all the time. Benchmark outside of the industry. So I try to at least once a month go to different industry, talk to the medical industry, I talk to oil and gas, I talk to automotive industry, to the IT industry, I benchmark, talk to them. First of all, I see what solutions do they have, what problems do they have, what solutions do I have, what problems do I have. I try to match them together basically. I can let them capitalize on some of the solutions they have, and they can capitalize on some of the solutions that we have, and building this synergy between everything we do. And also looking at the governance models, you know, look how people govern, how the models that you use for running the companies, the corporations, and learn from them. That might be something you can actually adapt and use. So risk is very important. You know, anything you do, you have to take risk. Now the key is how do you reduce the risk as much as possible? Take measured risk is the key, but you can never minimize risk if you want to do something exciting and interesting. So I had the conference, organized a conference about a few months ago, last September actually. I've invited 50 executives from all over the world. Executives from the Chief Innovation Officers from L'Oreal, from Google, from Senior Vice President from Samsung, Toyota, Head of Academic Institutions. And so we're talking about what can we learn from each other, what successes do you have, how do you harvest innovation, how can we learn from failures, how can we learn from successes, can we transfer these things from one industry to another. It was a fascinating discussion, I think it was an excellent conference. But one of the guys, the president from Toyota, actually mentioned something interesting here. He said, if executives say this will be a success, you have to pay attention. If they say, oh, this is going to totally fail, then maybe that's something's going to be successful. It's completely the opposite. And he was referring to the Prius, the Toyota Prius. So Toyota Prius is one of the most successful cars we've ever had, Toyota ever had. And most of the executives at that time were completely against it. They were totally opposing to it. They didn't want to do it. And it turned out to be completely wrong. It was the best decision they've done in a long time. So that tells you sometimes there is a big disconnect between executives and middle management at different levels as well. Management cycle. So, for example, I've seen new employees when they come to the company, they often look at directors, executives, and managers as role models. So if you have a bad manager, if you have a bad director, if you have bad executives, that behavior will be mimicked by younger employees because they think this is the behavior that I need to adapt to become successful in the company. So if you ever have a chance to do something about it, pay close attention, and you don't want that cycle to keep repeating. You create bad habits over and over and over. And unfortunately, when things go wrong, design, research and development and innovation are the first things that keep companies flushed, and that's a big issue. Because when things go wrong, this is the best time to start investing in research, development, and innovation. Because by the time things become well, you're already ahead of the competition in everything that you do, and you develop product that nobody else was able to do because people were slashing their budgets. So that's why people, smart companies, actually they shelter their research, development, and innovation completely different places, different units, physically actually in different locations, to make sure they remain good. Now, I like to benchmark, like I said, to different companies. One of the companies I go to typically is Google, Silicon Valley. And the minute you step in the floors of Google, you feel different. Everything is designed in such a way that inspires you to create, to talk, to collaborate. And they tell you, actually, you cannot force innovation on somebody. But you can actually, what you can do is create an environment in which innovation is allowed to exist. So everything they do and the way they create ideas, you can actually come up with an idea, discuss it with the manager, and in no time you'll have budget, give you 20% of your time to start working on it. So the whole environment, not only from a physical environment, from the governance environment as well, they do an excellent job in creating innovation. Pushing innovation, sometimes executives will tell you, we do want to do innovation, let's do it. And then you have amazing ideas coming from employees. Everything stops in the middle management. So, because every time you take innovation, it's always a risk element that you need to take. And people don't feel comfortable doing something new, something risky. So I think a way to do that, executives actually should put it into performance evaluation that middle management should actually are required to be able to produce certain innovative things. And if you solve that thing, then you have a complete engine going from the executives to the employees, creating ideas and moving forward with the organization. But you need to be careful to the middle management because that's where most of the things finish. So I don't know if you recognize this handsome guy here on the right. So that's supposed to be me, the guy that threw me pushing us forward. And actually the good thing about that I would like to share is kids they will never be embarrassed to share anything with you. They can draw the craziest drawing and share it with you and be proud of that. And that is the thing that you need to create. That's the environment you need to create in your organization. Never have people feel embarrassed to share an idea, even if it's crazy. So the crazy idea, the better. Maybe it's not adaptable, it's not usable. You put it on the side and you say, this is an interesting idea. Thanks for sharing it with us. We'll look into it and see what we can do. As opposed to saying, no, what the hell are you thinking? This is a bad idea. Completely change. So it's very important that you create that environment, that synergy between employees and enable people to share with their strengths that they So the environment is very, very important. Today we have to talk at the business school, one of the universities. It was impressive how innovative it was. So one day, I'll share a quick anecdote with you guys. We were in a company talking, discussing things, and we're sitting in a very formal environment at the table. And the discussion was extremely formal, and we weren't getting anywhere. Just kind of very weird discussion. So we decided to take a break and go to get some coffee. They had one of these amazing coffee machines. You can make yourself cappuccinos, get some snacks. We went there, we started making coffee, and the discussion changed 100%. I thought I was talking to different people, not the same people we were meeting with 15 minutes. So the environment itself, it has a significant influence on innovation and creativity, on being comfortable sharing ideas. So it's very important to create an environment, physical environment, to do that as well. Just a couple of charts left. So when strategizing about the future, people typically, when they think about the future, they think about the limitations we have in today's technology. So I often like to invest in things that have not been invented yet. So there is ways to do that. So that you look at, for example, intellectual properties, where it's going, research papers, where our venture capital is investing, and you get data points. And essentially, you can use all data points to estimate approximately what's the next industries and the economy is going to look like in 10 years or so, and start investing in it today right away. And like I said, build synergies, collaboration between different teams, academia, government, industry, and there's substantial value for doing all that stuff. So no matter what we do, you know, if all of us are working on this amazing stuff, imagine if we put our collective intellect together as different industries and different companies and academic institutions. I think the limitations will be boundless, and we'll be able to achieve things we've never been able to do before. So with that, I would like to thank you for your attention.